The criminal calls Eitan Negri.
All right. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, sir.
All right. Turn your back in, please.
Thank you. Good morning, sir.
Good morning.
Could you please tell the jurors your first and last name?
My first name is Eitan, last name is Negri.
Can you spell your first name for the record?
Eitan.
And your last name?
Negri.
And what do you do for work?
I'm a physician associate, physician assistant.
And did you go to school for that?
Yes.
Can you tell us about your educational background?
I did my undergraduate at City College of New York, and I did a post-bac at Brooklyn College, followed by a PA program at Touro University in Manhattan.
And do you currently work as a physician's assistant?
Yes.
Do you currently work in the state of Massachusetts?
No, ma'am.
Are you licensed in the state of Massachusetts?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you licensed in any other states?
New York State.
I'm going to go back to January of 2023. Were you working in Massachusetts then?
Yes.
And where were you working?
Brigham and Women's Hospital.
And were you in that same role as a physician's assistant?
Yes.
And what were you doing? What were your general duties in that role working at Brigham and Women's?
Generally, you assess a patient, you diagnose, you formulate a plan with an attending physician, and you execute that plan throughout the day. It encompasses various things.
Were you working in any particular department at Brigham and Women's back in January of 2023?
The Trauma Burn Surgical ICU.
Now, I'm going to draw your attention to a particular patient that came into the Brigham and Women's Hospital on January 24th of 2023. That patient was Lindsay Clancy. Do you recall encountering this patient on January 25th of 2023?
Yes.
And what did you do as it pertained to the care and treatment of this patient?
I received the information from the shift before me, formulated a plan, examined her, assessed her, staffed that plan with the attending physician, and executed that plan throughout the day.
And fair to say this particular patient had injuries that you were directed to observe, review, form that plan on?
Correct.
What were the injuries?
She had multiple injuries. The most acute were injuries that were requiring consultation with other services, and the ones that I directly managed were the lacerations to her wrists and just her wrists, actually.
And as far as when you say she had other acute injuries, you were not involved in the care of her for those, correct?
I was involved in the care that involved consulting other services to manage those things, yes.
Okay, and as far as any sort of repair work that you were doing as a physician's assistant working with the trauma surgeons, what repair work were you assigned to do?
Laceration repair.
And on this particular patient, where were the injuries or lacerations that you were going to repair?
She had multiple lacerations on both of her wrists. She had superficial on her neck, which I did not repair.
Okay, and as it pertained to the wrists, did you go through that process of observing, reviewing, coming up with a plan, and then repairing those injuries?
Yes.
And were you directed to do that by any particular doctor?
Not necessarily directed. A lot of those things fall within my scope, and since they were less acute, they kind of fell down the chain to me.
Okay. And you're aware that she was being seen and treated by a host of other doctors, nurses, an entire team?
Yes.
Okay. As it pertains to the wrist injuries, what did you do to examine those areas?
The first thing I do is assess the location, then I assess the severity, whether it requires intervention by someone other than myself. In this instance, it did not. So then I proceed with just kind of protocol laceration repair.
When would it be a situation where you'd need somebody else to intervene?
If it required surgical intervention or suturing repair beyond my skill set, in this instance, it did not.
Okay. And so, referring to these particular injuries, when you observed them, did you observe any areas of active bleeding?
No.
And fair to say they had been treated by nurses and other staff prior to you encountering these injuries, correct?
Yes, they were dressed and covered before I got there.
Now, when you assessed them, you noted that they were bilateral, correct?
Yes.
What does that mean?
It means on both sides of the body, so both wrists.
Okay. And so, referring to the right wrist, what were your observations of the injuries to the right wrist?
The right wrist, as far as my reference to the note, is that she had a few lacerations, one of which was severe and deep enough to require repair.
And fair to say that right wrist injury was the one that you repaired was 3 centimeters deep.
Approximately, if that's what my note says, then that's what it was.
Okay. And on a wrist, or this area of the wrist where you observed the injuries, that depth of 3 centimeters, did that require further surgical intervention, or were you able to suture that area?
I was able to suture that area. As far as what happened subsequent to that, I wasn't there, so I'm not sure.
Okay. And how many sutures did you use to repair that injury?
I believe 3.
And in relation to any other cuts or lacerations that were on that right wrist, did any other of those lacerations require suturing?
No.
How did you treat those other injuries?
Just irrigation, meaning cleaning them out, and then using a type of tape to close them shut.
And that's generally referred to as a steri strip, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Do those photographs depict the repairs or the sutures that you did on the right wrist of Lindsay Clancy?
Yes.
This is Exhibit 201. This is the right wrist, correct?
Correct.
And those black lines in the middle of the photograph are those the sutures that you did?
Correct.
202, Exhibit 202. These white strips that are all around the injury, are those the steri strips?
Correct.
On the left wrist, do you recall what you observed to be the injuries on that wrist?
I believe there was a similar laceration, just shorter in length, that required fewer sutures.
Okay. And fair to say, if your notes reflect that the left wrist had one, meaning just a singular 2 centimeter deep linear cut, that would have been what your observations were of the injury that you repaired?
Correct.
And how many sutures did that injury require?
1 suture.
And were there other areas that you observed that had some sort of laceration?
I believe similarly, just superficial ones that needed steri strips.
And again, in treating this particular injury, when you came upon it, was there active bleeding or any concern that you needed more intervention other than a suture?
At that time, no.
And are those the suture that you did on the left wrist of Lindsay Clancy?
Yes, ma'am.
And Exhibit 204, which is just a closer upshot of that. Is that correct?
Yes.
And again, you see the white strips. Those are also steri strips that were applied.
Correct.
Now, in relation to any of these wounds on the right or the left wrist, did you observe the lacerations to go any deeper than the subcutaneous tissue?
On my observation, no.
And when we talk subcutaneous tissue, we're talking about that fatty tissue underneath your skin, correct?
Correct.
And did you have to return at any point, to your knowledge, to readdress these issues or do any further laceration repair as it pertained to this patient?
On that shift, no.
Do you recall if you did it on any other shift?
No.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Mr. Reddington.
Is it Mr. Negri?
Negri, yes, sir.
And you're not a doctor, you're a physician assistant, is that what it is?
That's correct, yes.
Okay. And how long had you worked for Brigham and Women's prior to seeing Lindsay Clancy that on January 24, 23?
I believe I was in my 2nd year of employment with Brigham and Women's.
Okay, and you got to keep your voice up. People back here have to be able to hear you too,
I
okay?
believe I was in my 2nd year of employment at Brigham and Women's.
You're not suggesting for 1 minute that after you did your butterfly stitches, Lindsay could have got up and walked out the door of the hospital, right?
No, sir.
And would you agree with me that, in fact, she was critically ill when you saw her, right?
Yes, sir.
And she certainly wasn't critically ill from COVID or a flu or something like that, right?
No, not to my knowledge.
You know that there are notes that are prepared for the records from the hospital. For example, on January 24, 2023, hospital admission form is filled out. Do you know a Dr. Jeffrey Andrew Anderson?
Yes.
And he was, what was his position that night?
He was one of the trauma surgeons and also one of the intensivists, the attending physicians in the ICU.
All right. You've had a chance to review a number of records and photographs with the DAs, I imagine, right?
I've reviewed my own procedure note.
Okay, so what does that mean?
It means I reviewed the note that I wrote myself regarding the laceration repairs.
Okay, is that the note that indicates that it appears as though that, for example, on the right upper extremity, there's a 3.5 centimeter deep laceration on the volar aspect of the wrist?
I don't believe that I commented saying volar specifically, so I don't know if that's in regards to my note, but I believe my note did say about 3 centimeters deep, yes.
Okay, so do you recall indicating in your note that it was superficial laceration, or did you indicate that it was a deep laceration?
I indicated that some of them were superficial, and the one that I repaired in particular was 3 centimeters deep.
And you've had occasion to speak to the prosecutors on this case, and that they've asked you about the superficial injury to her wrist, right?
Correct.
In addition to the, as indicated on page 75 of the Brigham Women's Hospital record that I have, and we can fix that with other records if it doesn't coincide, there's a note from Dr. Anderson that the right upper extremity, 3.5 centimeter deep laceration volar aspect of the wrist, left upper extremity, 2 centimeter deep laceration on the volar aspect of the wrist. Do you agree with that assessment?
Yes, sir.
All right. And then you were able to, as you say, clean it up with saline or whatever, and then you stitched up what you had to stitch up, right?
Yes, sir.
Did you have anything to do with the massive transfusion that she had?
No, sir.
Do you have anything to do with the treatment of the transected spine that she had, the shattered spine?
No, sir.
Do you have anything whatsoever to do with the insertion of tubes on both sides of her body and the draining of the blood that had pooled in her middle cavity?
Just the management of those tubes after, but not the placement.
Okay. So you were there while that was done?
I was there managing once they had been placed, but I was not there for the placement of them.
Okay, but you knew that they were in there, that they were draining the blood. Okay.
Yes.
And do you know where the blood came from that was in her middle extremity?
I don't know specifically. I'd have to refer back to the imaging reports.
In any event, you know that shortly thereafter she coded, right?
Yes.
Were you there for that?
No, sir.
And basically, that means that the patient has, in effect, died from cardiac arrest, right?
Not necessarily died, but their heart has stopped beating for that.
And then there's the crash teams and everybody hopefully revives the person, right?
Correct.
And you guys did that, or they did, and they were successful reviving her, correct? So, without going through everything, you'd agree with me, sir, that your observations would be of the wrist, the repair, and the taking care of the tubes after they were inserted into both sides of her chest.
That's correct.
And that was your involvement extended, correct? You're all done after
I was involved in the ongoing management of her care throughout the day, but just as you stated, not the things that you asked me about.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sure.
I'd rock with these.
They're part of the record. I would object if we could approach.
I don't want to have a jury get any go through 10.
No, I know that. Listen, why don't mark them for identification, and then we can address that.
Thank you, sir.
Okay.
Maybe just with a few questions.
Sure.
Mr. Negri, I'm just going to approach and show you
Okay, thank you. All right, thank you.
records. That's like Brigham and Women's, page 76. Can you just...
Specifically this highlighted there?
Yeah, I would direct your attention to the bottom paragraph where it says exam. That's not your note from the record, correct?
Correct.
And when it's noted that the right upper extremity, left upper extremity has 3.5 centimeter deep laceration, 2 centimeter deep laceration, deep in the medical notes is not a adjective of it, correct? It's more of a directionality of the injury.
It's a description of, basically an objective unit of measure.
But when we say deep, it means that it goes down into the skin as opposed to across the skin.
What we say, it's what the record says.
All right, I understand. Go ahead. Just, if you could ask that question again.
As far as your assessment of injuries, deep goes down in the skin as opposed to across the skin.
Correct.
As far as Dr. Anderson goes, you knew that him to be one of the attendings and a trauma surgeon in this case. Were you aware that on January 24th he had examined these injuries and indicated they did not require repair at that time?
I don't recall specifically. I'm sorry.
But you came in to repair these on January 25th?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anything on that?
Oh, thank you.
All right, thank you, sir. Thank you. You're all set. Buckingham, please.
The Commonwealth would call Nicholas Roberts as its next witness, please.